Hi, I'm Dr. Janice Morrow. Thanks for joining us for another episode of American Mood Swings, where we talk about the brain and all things related to mental health. Welcome. Our special guest today is Dr. Zabina Basine. She is a child psychologist and expert. She had founded a company called Kidz, which is now transitioned to Listen to the Kids. But there's been a lot of legislation and talk of social media and its impact on kids. Australia just a couple of weeks ago passed the most restrictive legislation in the world. 16, they banned it for 16 and under. Many schools throughout our country are in discussions for this. So I wanted to get her thought. She's a parent of two kids, and just talk about, there's some more legislation called the Kids Online Safety Act. It did not pass Congress this week. It had passed in the Senate, but a lot of child safety advocates have all been advocating and working so hard the last couple of years. But I would just want to, we're going to talk about like social media and just a whole range of topics. So thank you, Doc. Most people call her Dr. Z. So thank you, Dr. Z, for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Janice. Just a little correction. I'm a child and adolescent psychiatrist. I am an MD.
Did I not say that? I'm sorry.
Well, it's very common for everyone to think it's psychology, but it's psychiatry. So I am an MD. I'm a physician.
All right. Well, Dr. Z, we're going to just give you the floor. We're going to let's talk about your company and the mission of Kids and how it's transitioned into Listen to the Kids.
Yeah, so Kidz was launched in 2020. It was a multicultural and mesh, which is mental, emotional, social health line of toys for children under fifth grade and below. So early childhood education, and it is now being focused to be licensed out to other toy companies. As the founder, I'm really focusing on Listen to the Kids and the transition from Kidz to Listen to the Kids. Because what Kidz taught me was more or less that the toys were not the importance, is what the kids wanted. And really, we started this conversation about how do we listen to the kids? How do we take the time to grow leaders through listening? And really, play was what I launched within Kidz, which is play is learning. And now we're doing, how do we create these leaders in this world who have so much to say to us, and they're our young youth. So that was really the transition and the mission behind it. And it really became an advocacy role, because I am just someone sitting there listening to kids in all age groups, because from 5 years old to 28 years old. And just, we are talking about the real reasons these kids have a voice, and they have so much to say about so many different topics. So that was really our origin story for that.
Let's go. Well, on that note, are there some things that people would be shocked to see that kids are discussing? Like maybe, oh, I didn't know
Yeah.
kids that young.
When we launched Listen to the Kids last year, and so I started traveling around the country, going to schools, going to theater programs, going to extracurricular activity programs, where kids really just sat down with us and we asked them questions and we got answers from them. So topics from social media, from phone, from mental health, from gun violence, from homelessness, from the government, and the questions, where we launched Kids for Democracy, which we did calls all across the country with kids from different states and different high schools, kids from the ages of 8 years old to 17 years old. And through those processes, we learned, the one thing they say to us over and over and over again is, no one's listening to us, but you want to give us this world, and we really don't want it.
Wow.
That's the common factor that we're hearing throughout the age group. So whether you're a millennial young parent to a young, kindergarten first grader, nobody's listening to them. They've lost trust in adults. They've lost trust in their teachers. They've lost trust in anyone that they think was supposed to give them guidance. Because it's always like, you're so young, you don't know what you're talking about, but here are the rules and regulations, and you need to follow them. But no one's hearing them. And that's where the topic of Listen to the Kids started. But what was interesting was, listening's even hard for adults. We don't do a very, very good job of listening. And that process of listening has to start with us before we actually teach it to our young youth. So that's really the fact that they want to be heard, but we don't know how to listen to them. And that was really the process of our conversation.
All right. Well, let's talk about your thoughts on this whole ban from Australia passing this ban. I don't know how they're going to enforce it. If they're going to start, I'm not generally a big fan of like big government. I kind of feel like I'm more in tune to like let the parents make their calls for their kids. But I've learned a lot this year from experts like yourself and other social media advocates. So, what are your thoughts on this legislation? And do you think it's too much, or do you think this is going in the right direction?
So when it comes to banning things, personally, I think the conversation's a little bit different. I don't agree with banning a lot of things. I'm also on the same page with that. I think there's need to be conversations. I think one of the problems we have seen in culturally in countries around the world is we have conversations with experts and we have conversations with adults, and who we're effectively giving these rules and regulations to, we are not having conversations with them. Now, there are multiple now new experts that are having conversations with young youth kids about how to regulate this, which I agree with them. Under 14, no child needs to be on social media. We have seen the effect of child artists, social media interactions, and places. But I think the conversations also have to start at home, because these are regulations parents need to be putting. I am not an expert in how to make sure social media is banned. That is not my expertise. My expertise is how do we regulate something and start our children early enough so we don't have habitual addictions,
Right.
right? Social media is not the only problem in our world. The
Huh.
problem is parents and adults and teachers want to put something as a blame that they're not actually doing, which is putting time with these kids.
Mm.
We are all so busy. I get that. I myself, as you know, have two children and constantly running around. But if I don't make the effective time for my children to teach them what is necessary and guidance for them, they're going to go do what they want to do. Because we give them, as early as 3 years old, digital. Digital is still television. You put Sesame Street on, you put Romper Room on, that's still digital. Or we put them in front of a singing YouTube channel or something. There is always a moderation in something, which you should do. But if you leave them there, now you're creating a space that they know that that is something that they can shut off the world and just focus on. We obviously had COVID that caused our children to also have to go to digital because of school and certain aspects. I really believe it has to start at home, where we make these decisions with our children. There are multiple wonderful books that have come out that have talked about how during COVID and previous to that, we've handed phones to our children, we've handed them iPads, we've handed them computers, and then we say, oh, now we have to fix the problem. Well, yes, that is agreeable, but this is also a digital era. We can't be in our countries so behind where we're not going to hand them digital requirements also. You will see other countries lead ahead. Social media is one thing that we can say we need to cut it off for children or start it at a later age. Now, there are also wonderful apps out there for children under 14. And I've worked with these companies, and they are not social media run the way Instagram is and Facebook is and X is and TikTok is. It is run specifically for younger kids, and it's fun, and the kids get to do challenges, and they get to read books, and you have multiple celebrities coming on those apps. But we have to find them, and we as parents and adults have to look at what they're looking at for us to go, I will say this out loud. My colleague, who is my founder with me, my co-founder for Listen to the Kids, she is not an advocate of giving her child a phone before the age of 14. My daughter has a phone. She has no social media apps on there. She has a few games like solitaire and some fun kid games, but
Right.
her use for that phone is when she is at dance and she is in her extracurricular activities and she is late night there because some of her classes go to 7 or 8 o'clock. She has a phone to call me, and I need access to her. She does not take the phone to school. She does not keep the phone in her room. She does not have it. But there is a place that I need access to her. The watch did not work for her specifically. Again, as her parent, I have looked at what I want to do, but I have to put in the time and effort. We need to sit down with our kids and tell them, no, my children will not have social media till they're 14 or above. It's just not going to happen. She and my son have had YouTube accesses, but I've talked to other parents. They're okay with it, but they go and watch things. I think these conversations need to start at our houses, and we need to start them within our families. And then, very big thing, we as adults need to get off our phones if we want our children not to be on our phones.
I was.
Our children, yeah,
Oh,
our children mimic everything we do. I don't care how old you are. Your 28-year-old still going to mimic what you're doing. They're your children.
I heard you in one podcast saying something that your daughter, I don't know when that was, that she asked you to look at her when you talk to her, because that really that like pulled at my heart because I feel the same way. I mean, most people are like glued to their phone, and
Yeah.
and I wish that parents, I feel like you're saying, I wish that they'd say not at the dinner table when your family's here, like a holiday like yesterday when
Yeah.
grandpa and grandpa are here, all electronics away, you're going to visit and spend quality
Yeah.
time. But I don't see many people doing that. But I definitely, that kind of hit. I felt that. So, and that must have made you feel that way when she said, "Would you look at me when you when you talk to me?" Yeah.
So my son and my daughter are big advocates of putting us in our place. Let's put it that way. Yeah. But they mimic what we do because my husband and I are very strict on these specific digital rules in our house. 20 minutes, then you stop. For 2.5 hours, you can have no digital because it will affect your brain. There is very specific rules we have started. Now, don't get me wrong, I am not the best person at that because I live off my phone or my computer or when I'm working. And I have children and they have to understand that I spend quality time with them, but when I'm working, I got to get it done. So if you're coming to speak to me during the time that I'm working now, then I'm going to be concentrated on this. So, that's another teaching thing. But it was a moment where I was checking something and he came to ask me a question and it wasn't a work time. And both my son and daughter have told me, hello, can you get off your phone and look at us while we're talking to you? It's the truth. They're right. They're absolutely right.
I know.
There's nothing wrong with them calling me out if I am going to teach them to do that.
Yeah.
Eye to eye contact, unjudgmental conversations, and not interrupting the person for 1 minute when they're talking. That is good listeners. And that's what their expectation is. So if I'm going to give them guidance on that, they're going to have the expectation from me as well.
All right. Good. Yeah, kids. I've heard my favorite was years ago. I heard Robert De Niro. Whenever I hear a celebrity being interviewed, they always say, "Well, what your parent?" And they all say the same thing. To my kids, I'm just mom and dad. And he said, nobody humbles you more than your kids because
Yeah.
they don't put you on the platform like they see everything.
My daughter said that to me. She goes, "You may be Dr. Z to a bunch of other kids, but you're still mom to me." I was like,
Oh,
okay.
sweet. Well, one of the things I wanted to mention too that I was really interested about is that you have focused, it sounded like from listening to your other conversations, the multicultural education and exposure. Because like one of the things I heard you talk about, and I only learned of this holiday, for example, like maybe 5 years ago, and I'm almost 60, Diwali. I never,
Yeah.
I never heard. It's this beautiful celebration of lights and all that's good in the world in the November time. And I thought but I started decorating for it, and it felt so good when I decorated at the office. Like all these Indian people came up to me, were like, "Wow, nobody ever." But I was so bummed that like, wow, I'm in my 50s and I never heard of Diwali. So you've talked about that and your mission with this, like listen to the kids. How are you doing that? Like, how do you go about doing this multicultural and raising awareness for other cultures and your Sikh culture?
Yeah, so listen to the kids is more on the aspect of bringing in the new um, conversations that are important to the youth. In Kidz created the multicultural line of education, which was in Kidz really brought in teaching the young kids about other people's communities that are outside your own community. So being Sikh and being, my children are half Hindu and half Sikh, we celebrate Diwali in two ways. One is through the Sikh customs and then through the Hindu customs. But one of my goals was with my kids was I wanted to teach them about other people's communities, because we're so common about like teaching, about Diwali and the Sikh religious holidays. But it was like my kids wanted to learn about Kwanzaa, and they wanted to learn about, the different Jewish cultures and Jamaican cultures and like all these other cultures. And that's what we started doing, was outside of our own culture, I started teaching them about everybody else's culture that was in their classroom. And then they all started interacting, talking. And what was hilarious was their Festival of Lights is not celebrated only in Diwali. Hanukkah is the Festival of Lights. There are 16 other countries around the world that celebrate the Festival of Lights at different times, but in the similar way, which is good over evil, and bringing light into the world, and bringing peace into the world, and bringing hope into the world. But the meaning was the same. And that's what multiculturalism is. We're actually all more similar than we are different. We just pray a different way. We celebrate sometimes a different way, but we're all trying to actually celebrate the same thing. It's just taught to us differently. And that was the reason for multiculturalism, because I was trying to bring together these different communities and customs to show my children that we actually are more similar, and we just have to figure out the ways to show it. So that was really the exciting part about in Kids and teaching multiculturalism.
I love that. I never really thought about it like that. All these cultures celebrating. Hanukkah just started yesterday. Well, just kind of going a different direction. I'm just curious because I'm talking to a child expert, a psychiatrist. Well, I'm fascinated that like everybody I know, nobody talks to their kids about sex. They'll say, "Oh, they're going to get a little bit of that in school," and and it seems to me, it's such an important natural
Yeah.
like every single person's going to be curious. My nephew in Hawaii is now like 16 and he's Japanese. So I know that like his mother's told me they don't talk about those kinds of things at all. But everybody I know, when I ask them, like, are your kids curious? Are they asking you? And they are like, no, they'll figure it out. And I wonder why that is. I know that parents don't really want to talk to their kids about sex, teenagers, like that's the last period. But at some point, I feel like your parents should have this discussion, like what are your thoughts and what do you think is an appropriate age, because kids eventually are curious. And I'm just kind of surprised, like I wonder why. I'm a little baffled, like why nobody can. It's such a natural human experience, why no one will talk to their kids about sex.
You know, I don't know that why either. So I'm going to tell you a little story, and then I'm going to go into what I have told multiple parents and multiple teachers as well as and adults. I basically had a very dear friend of mine whose mother, when I was in med school, was an OBGYN, and she had four daughters. And she sat down with us and she said she turned sex into an academic project. Like sex is a natural thing, it's a hormonal thing, it's an intimate thing, but she turned it into, this is what sex is. It is intercourse. It is a man and woman, or a woman, whatever, your gender specificity is. This is what happens. And it's just this. And that's all. And it was so interesting because she was like, I have four daughters. They're going to be curious about it, but I'm going to turn into a medical terminology education piece. And I think she did that, which I realize now, to say, I'm not deterring you from sex. I'm just telling you, this is all it is. Get the curiosity out of your system, which was, in those days, the mother's way of teaching her daughters. So then I realized when I started having kids, I talked to my husband and I said, I really have to understand sex is just one part of a body growing, right? Where I have a boy and I have a daughter, I have a son and a daughter, and both of them, we have not talked about our genitalia as like, this is your pee-pee and this is your this. It is very medical terminology. You have a vagina and you have a penis. This is, your anus. It's all done. Your sister's going to grow breasts. She's young now, but we've already started talking about the menstruation cycle. Both my kids know what the menstruation cycle is, how it occurs. Intimacy is a different conversation. We show intimacy. My husband and I are very intimate. We love touching one another. We love kissing in front of our kids, but we talk about it because it's about love for us, right? That there's nothing wrong with affection. My children love giving hugs to us. They love cuddling with us. That's affection. So all of these things will eventually come into what is intimacy and sex. That's hormonal also. There is going to be a feeling you get when you get older. Is the time 9 years old? Probably not. I'm not ready to tell my daughter or son what is intercourse, but I know by the time she's having menstruation cycles, we need to talk about that because her hormones will start feeling something and there'll be a change. We have multiple books that we've started reading about the changing of her body and how certain feelings are happening. And if someone likes you, now we talk about liking kids all the time, they don't think about it as sex. My son constantly was like, I got a couple girlfriends who like me. I'm like, who are they? And he's like, I don't know. They say they like me. And I'm like, okay, but that's not sexual. That's a feeling, right? But that eventually will build to something. So there's a time for it. But we talk about that. So what do we do with this feeling? Well, they can like me. I don't really like them back. Or do you have a crush on someone? These feelings can build to something. So we've got to look at how we talk about these things, but I don't think it's wrong to talk about these things as early as they start understanding what their bodily organs are. By 5 years old, they start looking at that is breast, that is vagina, that those are still things they need to know about. And if we turn it into a reality conversation rather than a pretend conversation, now they're going to actually know that these are knowledgeable things to discuss. So my children know that this is what physically a man has, this is what physically a woman has. And now as my daughter's going, they know I have a menstruation cycle. My son will be very normal going to buy his girlfriend's, his wife's pads and tampons because
Okay.
we've normalized it in our home. And that's part of also there's a time where a woman becomes very, intimate when she wants to. But that's going to be a little bit later when my daughter's older. But there's nothing wrong with it. It could be 10, it could be 11. Girls are having their periods much earlier, hormonally too. They're changing much earlier. Also, I will tell you, if we make sex a normalized conversation, you will see the level of pornography for young boys go down, and the curiosity will not go into an addictive pornographic. The studies have shown lately that younger and younger boys between 9 to 11 years old are becoming pornographic addiction because they are not having conversations. Pornographic addiction also can turn into trauma for these young boys. If their parents are having earlier conversations with them, then sex becomes normalized, that it is a normal thing. And men, as fathers, could step in to have these conversations because as early as 9, men will have masturbation urgencies. That's also part of a sexual conversation to have. The sex talk isn't just intercourse. We need to forget that. The sex talk is multiple conversations. And I think that's what parents forget. It's not just about the two people coming together to have it. It's about how our body actually deals with it as well. So I think as early as they are growing up, to tell them about their organs, to the point when young boys are starting to feel that they have to, masturbate. That's part of it too.
Well,
So
I'm glad.
again, family discussion though.
Well, no, I'm glad you brought it up because I had three brothers growing up, and I know that when I would ask my mom as a teenager, I grew up Mormon, and it was very much like when you're married to have sex. So that's how we were taught and raised in our culture.
I was taught the same way.
And when I would try to ask my mom questions, really, and we were pretty close, but she'd always say, "Well, we'll just talk about it like right before you get married." Right before your honeymoon, which I thought was crazy. So at that time, there was a magazine called Cosmopolitan. I think it's still around, but
I
I,
know, yeah.
I was like, as a teenager, I was obsessed with cosmo, but mostly because we had one little class at school, but the whole, like, the masturbation, I mean, I'm not going to go off on that, but I listen to a
Yeah.
lot of stand-up comedy, and all the comedians talk about this. And over the last couple of years, I sit here every night thinking, oh, I didn't realize how much meant, but it seems like it's normal
Yeah.
and natural, and you don't want to shame somebody. But I did want to mention one thing, because you just made me think about it. Like, I didn't know the stats about, like, if you're not talking about sex to the kids, how they could go like to like a little deviant. One of my really oldest and closest friends, a couple months ago, he called me. He was in a lot of duress because he's divorced, but he has a 16 years old son. And he told me that, like, it all worked out. They didn't press charges, but he said the police showed up at his ex-wife's house, And I don't even know how they got in because you're supposed to have a search warrant. I don't know the legal, but they confiscated his computer and they said he was looking at child pornography. My friend's son, and he's very religious, and just like it horrified him. But he also, I think it turned out to be hackers, like they can get into people's accounts. I think that's what happened. But there were so many questions. But I mean, he was just so distraught, and even pornography would have been one thing, but the whole child porn was different. But it was just on that note. I love that you mentioned the correct anatomical. I hate it when people nickname and they can't even call the organs what they are.
Yeah.
I Just a pet
Well,
peeve.
it's interesting you're bringing up this subject. One of the things that I've recognized is we want to teach our children good touch, bad touch, right? When they're young, right? We want to protect them. That's also part of a sexual conversation. Because if you're not teaching them to protect their bodies or set boundaries for their bodies, sex is also a very bad place that could hurt them.
Mm.
They could have a whole bad type of situation that happens with them when they're young teenagers too. So starting this conversation early is an opportunity for them not to have those outcomes occur or those occurrences occur. And that's the important part of them also enjoying it and it not being something that's tormenting to them.
Wow.
But these are conversations we have to start early with them to have those conversations. And so they protect themselves and know that no means no for both sides. And also, you don't have to give in to something because you think you're supposed to give in to something. You don't have to hug someone, you don't have to kiss someone, you don't have to precede someone just because even in your 20s you feel like that because you're told you're supposed to do that.
Wow.
But these conversations have to happen early.
Wow. All
Because
right.
in their minds, once you start teaching them, no, we're going to only hear about it later. Oh, no, no, you have to go do this because it's just your uncle. Or, oh, no, no, it's your boyfriend now. Oh, it's your husband. No, that's not how it works. We
There,
have to start them early to say, this is uncomfortable for us,
well,
or this is comfort.
well, I'm glad to hear you. It's so much more open now to talk about these things. There was someone, I was like 14, and there was a man at church, and he never anything more than hugging, but his hug, I don't know, they were a little too, he was married and he was a little over complimentary. And it was just, I know it made me uncomfortable. I never said a word. In today's world, I probably would have gone home, told my parents, or handled it differently. But as a 14 years old girl and this married man's hugging you a little too long, it just made me uncomfortable. Like, I don't
Yeah.
know. It's good that you're talking about this with your kids. So let's go. One of the conversations I heard you mention that like when kids do bad things or teenagers, they're punished rather than why they're acting out. So that made me think of something I did like as a fourth grader. It was so long ago. Like I don't have any idea why I was shoplifting a lot. I don't know why, but I threw a rock at someone. We were fighting. I was, yeah, fourth grade. I threw a rock and she was in the hospital for a few days. So I was grounded my whole fourth grade year. I haven't thought about it till I heard your podcast. Like it was, I don't remember which podcast, but you were saying that kids are punished. But I mean, there had to be a reason like why I was acting out and threw a rock. I don't remember, but to do something so horrible. But let's talk about that.
So let's just go back to your situation, right? So there is a fourth grade situation where you are, and this is really acting out by, shoplifting. There's something going on, whether it's in your brain, in your house, and then you had an aggressive manner that occurred where you threw a rock, right? Let me ask you a question. Did anyone sit down with you and ask you any questions about those two situations or hear from you? Not tell you, but listen to you. Do you remember anybody talking to you to hear about that?
Definitely not. It was just like you were grounded your whole fourth grade year. I remember because I
Yeah.
couldn't. Our class went to like Great America, and I was ashamed and embarrassed, of course. But no
Yeah.
discussion, and I don't have any idea why I was acting out like that. But no, there was no
Right.
conversation.
And that's really the biggest issue. because there is something that you are looking for, whether you're looking for affection, whether you're looking for some sort of, conversation, whether you're looking for something that was happening. And I can't go back, and obviously that's a whole longer conversation you and I need to have about
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
But I think what we do as parents and adults and teachers and mentors and coaches is we want to either fix the situation, we want to reprimand the situation, and we want to move out of it, the situation. We never look at the fact that when we are going through this situation with a young youth, whether it's a young toddler or a middle schooler or a high schooler or even a college student, all we want to do is tell them, shun it, move it away, and pack it up and throw it. And let's go to the next thing. But they have to recognize if you want to fix a situation like anything in the world, you have to find the essence of the problem. And the problem could be psychological, it could be emotional, it could be medical, it could be anything in your brain, or it could be physically hormonal. We don't know what that child or that youth is going through unless we sit down and be quiet and listen to them and ask them questions and get their information out. It's the interesting thing I hear in teachers all the time. I go around the country all the time talking to teachers. And one of the things they say is, our students never talk to us like this the way they talk to you. I go, do you be quiet and listen? Do you unjudgmentally keep your mouth closed and don't say a word and let them talk for 15 minutes? I don't care what gibberish they say. Just listen to them, because you will get that conversation you're looking for. I speak to multiple therapists and psychologists and psychiatrists all the time about their practices and what's happening. In medicine, one of the things we have forgotten is we are supposed to deal with the patient, not the parent, not the teacher, not the coach. Our person is the child. And if we're not following and getting that information out of the child, then we're not doing right by our patient. And I think that's what parents forget is parents forget that their children are not their patients, but they're their children. They're not objects, they're not toys, they're not things just to keep on the side. And if you want to create a amazing adult, you're constantly guiding these youth to become adults. And if we're just putting them to the side and fixing their problems or shunning their problems away, you're not giving them guidance to fix it. So if someone had sat with you, one, there may have been other things that you would not have done in life to change, or you would have actually found out what really was the essence of these issues. And
So,
it didn't have to be you to go to a therapist. It's multiple, it's not a one-time conversation, it's not a two-time. These are multiple conversations. And that's why I say spending 10 to 15 minutes a day with your children without any distractions every single day, you're going to learn something new, not only about yourself, but you're going to learn about your kid as well. And that's why we need to stop and listen to our children, even especially in those times. We need to stop blaming them. We need to stop shaming them. We need to stop shunning them, because that's the easiest thing to do so we can move on with our lives. And it doesn't work that way. You've got to stop with the youth today and give them a moment.
since you're a child psychiatrist, can do parents, because they're minors, do parents have to sit in the room, or are you allowed to talk with kids by themselves? It just made me, I know the first time I ever went to, my mom took me to a therapist. I think I was just about 15. I was cutting school one day and she found me hiding in my room. I pretended to leave and she was like, "What are you doing?" But I was getting kind of bullied, and I felt ugly. It's so ridiculous now. It's so ridiculous. But I was like, I'm too ugly. They call me bongo lips. I can't handle it anymore. And nothing like what's happening in today's world with online. This is like in the 80s. But she said, we're going to a therapist like right now. I remember her pulling out the yellow pages and she took me. Then we went out for lunch. It was sweet of her. But she was kind of like, "Well, I don't know what to do with you, but this is crazy. You have to go to school. You can't hide out in your room because you think you're too ugly." But I wonder, like, are you allowed to see kids, or do the parents have to sit in, or can you have private conversations with kids? Since you're there.
You can have private conversations with children. The children have to learn to trust the psychologist or the psychiatrist. previous to opening up. It's not an easy job to do. If you have the parent in there and sometimes they don't want to discuss in front of the parents, they actually majority of the time don't want to discuss in front of the parents anything. And so that's really it. And then there are laws to protect the children that they're your patient, right? So you don't have to tell the parents everything unless it's, legally binded that they're going to harm themselves or harm somebody else. These are like, we're advocates of the court also, right? So we have to report things. But no, the patient is our first thing. That's our first, as they can sit with us and talk to us alone. I mean, they're not going to open up in front of their parents.
I would
One, the parents are bringing them, so they don't trust us anyways. They don't have faith in us. We're their parents' advocates. They don't believe us unless, they're at an older age and they build trust. But it's very hard to build that trust with the kid. One of the reasons that I left therapy practicing was because I think I can get through to more children and get what their needs are and base those guidances for them and for their parents when we're in bigger groups. I think children speak up more around their peers than they do individually.
Wow.
And that's really a really big place. Yeah.
You've also mentioned, I mean, you've kind of touched on it, like instead of when people say they're raising their kids, you like the phrase guiding adults better.
Yeah,
You kind of
I
touched on,
do.
you want to elaborate? I mean, you've kind of been,
Yeah, so we raise when you raise something, you're raising animals. You raise flock, you raise chicken, you raise cattle, you raise animals. I mean, I don't think human beings are animals. If you're raising something, then you've created an outcome for them. So when we raise something, then you have created that. So this chicken is going to lay eggs or it's going to become poultry. This cattle is going to do this and become this. That means you have created an outcome. So if you're raising something, then you've created the outcome for this child. I say we're guiding them to become adults because eventually when you listen to people, then you're giving them guidances. You're hearing them, you're taking in what they're saying, and then creating guidances for them so they can be adults. Because we're only children for 18 years. Let's remember that, according to the law. From 18 to 80, we are adults. We are longer adults than we are, according to the law, youth. But technically, our brains are not developed till we're 28. That's when we're actually fully developed.
right.
And that's when our brains actually work fully. So we're 28 and younger, you're still getting guidances, you're still taking things in. And when you guide someone, even when you're a teacher, you're guiding, when you're a coach, you're guiding, when you're a mentor, you're guiding. You're not raising, you're guiding. You're giving them what their needs are by guidance. Because they're letting you know this is what I need, and then you create the guidances. So when you have a dyslexic student, you will give him the correct guidances so he could be able to, he or she could read or do math or whatever their dyslexia is. You're not going to give them what a non-dyslexic student means. So in human life, you have to guide people. You have to guide them to create human beings. You're not guiding them to create an outcome for them. They have to create their own outcomes.
That's beautiful.
So that's the difference between raising and guiding.
Beautiful. Well, I'd love to hear a little bit because of your diverse, your multicultural approach. With it sounds like you were brought up Sikh, and I don't know if you're still Sikh, and if you're raising your kids Sikh, and if that's hard on them, or how if like I had a couple Sikh friends in junior college, and their parents were pretty strict, and it got to be, I mean, one of them, well, my friend, actually, it was really sad. They were they were twins, so we were like probably 21, and one of the daughter, my friend Suki, her mom, she would tell me that like she was engaged to someone and had to all be like kind of hidden, because she said that her parents, her dad had promised her to someone at 2 years old, his dad's best friend. And so the fact that she married someone she chose, they disowned her. I never believed that they would. That was an extreme situation. And the last time I talked to her, she did end up marrying the fellow. She had a child, and the mom was starting to come. I mean, she was really close with her mom. She used to go take her to temple like every day, but she would always tell me when they find out they're going to disown me. And I said, no, 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 that's crazy. They won't. You're their daughter. But they did. And I think the mom just went, but I don't know. So like, how are you? Are you raising your kids Sikh, and is it challenging in a culture like America, or not at all? I
I'm born and raised in the United States. So my parents came here in the 60s and 70s. My dad went to undergrad and grad school here. My father was a very well-known Sikh leader within Los Angeles. He built the first gold, temple here, which is the Gurdwara Sahib in Hollywood. My dad was the president. He was very, very well known within our community. Yeah, the community itself had some restrictions. My parents were still South Asian. They were immigrants. They wanted to keep the culture. But I went to Catholic school. I went to an all-girls
oh
Catholic school. Yeah, so my parents were a little bit more liberal, but no, my father wanted us to be raised. He had a very big saying. He goes, look, till you're 18, you're going to be raised in my house, in my religion, and the way I want you to do it. Once I kind of stepped out of my world, my father died unfortunately when I was 21, but my mom still is very religious. But I married a Hindu man. My kids are being raised both Hindu and Sikh. They're bi-religious. We are Punjabi culturally. But I know a lot of families who went through what your friend went through. But I don't think that's only the Sikh community.
oh
I
no,
think in general, immigrant communities that want to keep their culture and the parents don't know anything different from what they were raised in. I think times are changing. I think people are evolving as they are living within the United States, and immigrant parents' children are now having their own children. I think they're evolving also to show that multicultural, interracial marriages are normalized. I think India itself has moved ahead of, I always say if you want to look for a really true Indian, come to America because the Indians in India have moved ahead like 20 years. They're not as behind and stuff. But I think, if you're religious, you're religious. If you're non-religious, you're non-religious. I don't think any more parents are looking at that. Yeah, I think there was a generation of parents that were behind us. I think now it's just a little bit different. I know of a lot of friends who are non-Sikhs who are married Sikhs and very healthy, wonderful life. Um, I think this is a human being thing. I don't think this is a South Asian Sikh.
oh,
I think human beings need to accept one another as human beings. I think religion and culture and traditions are man-made. And I think we make our decisions how to uplift them and create a space for them, right? And then how do we want to give it to the next? You could be very, very conservative, and that's okay too. You could be liberal about it, that's okay too. And you could be, just in between, that's okay. But it's instead of judging each human being by who they are physically, religiously, or culturally, why don't we just look at each other like human beings? I don't think my religion depends on Dr. Z. That's not who I am. Dr. Z is a child expert and advocate creating a space for the youth to be listened to and empowering their voices. That's all I want to be known as. Not Dr. Z, the Sikh American who raises her children or guides her children to be Sikh and Hindu. I think my my personality and who I am is the child and adolescent psychiatrist creating leaders of this world by listening to them. And that's it. That's all I want to be known as. I
beautiful.
want to be their friend and their advocate. That's it.
There's a couple other questions, and then I just want to hear like anything else if I didn't bring up anything or what you're doing, like how you've transitioned your company. Like a timely topic that's kind of making a comeback is prayer in school. Now, I grew up Christian. It's funny because you mentioned my mother was Jewish. So a lot of her, when she married a Christian man, not her immediate family, but a lot of relatives disowned her when she married outside of the Jewish faith.
Yeah.
So I was raised Christian, and we were taught prayer. We definitely didn't grow up with prayer in school. I didn't go to any like religious schools, but it's kind of making a comeback now, and especially in the Midwest, and a lot of people are really against it, and I'm kind of like okay with it. I'd love to hear your thoughts, but it doesn't, and I feel in my heart like I don't care. I just like the ideal of a moment of silence, whatever faith you are, to like just think about God or think about anything you want,
Yeah.
or calm down for 2 minutes, because I've talked with a couple of anger management leaders in the last year doing this show, and the schools and the prisons and all these people that are incorporating meditation, the reticism
I
rate for
agree.
crime and truancy. It's
Yeah.
amazing. It's like night and day. So teaching kids how to meditate. So even a couple moments, but what do you think about like that? Like a moment of silence in school, and if it's too
A
controversial?
moment of silence I'm okay with. I think prayer needs to be a decision that parents and families make. I don't think that needs to be pushed on, especially a specific prayer, unless you're sending your child to a specific school, because there are Jewish schools, there are Christian schools, there are Catholic schools. If you're sending your child to that school, then you know that's going to be part of their curriculum. My parents were fine with it because I actually learned world religions, which I loved. It was such an intriguing thing for me. Um, but I don't think if we're going to let the government make decisions on what we have to do educationally in school, I think, our forefathers made a decision to separate church and politics, church and school. I think it was all supposed to be that way. Um, I think forcing someone to pray a certain way is now dictating them to do something, and I don't believe in dictating anyone to do anything. I don't care if you're a child or an adult. I don't think that should be done. I think we have to make that decision. And then secondly, I think meditation, breath work, that is very different than religion. That is actually good for young kids to learn because it helps them with their anxiety, with temperament, with we always say toddlers are always crazy. Well, let's start them. You do nap time. Let's do a meditation before you go to nap. Let's do breath work before you go to nap. But you're absolutely right. That's very different than we're talking about religion and prayer in school. Those are two very separate things. So my belief is meditation and breath work and teaching them calmness and releasing their anxiety and any type of trauma is great to do in schools. I think prayer is a decision you make at home. I think if you're dictating someone to pray a certain way, that is dictating them to do it, not guiding them to do it. But if you're going to send your child to a specific school that isn't a religious belief, that is a choice that the parent makes. That's just my opinion.
All right. Well, I'd love to hear it. So let's do some closing thoughts. Like how do people, since it sounded like I thought I heard you mentioned you don't do private practice. So let's talk about listen to the kids. And so how do people, are they going to find you? And if they want to hear more and
Yeah,
more,
yeah. So
how
Listen to the Kids is launched. We launched our programming in two schools, and we're now working with different states to bring it into different school districts. It's a curriculum and education program. And also we're launching a full-fledged programming and show behind it. And then we have our social media, but you can find my social media, which launches with Listen to the Kids. And so you should probably mid next year see something really exciting come out with Listen to the Kids with myself and Sheetal Sheth. And it will be all about what the youth wants to say and how do we empower their voices. And it's with the kids. It's literally with the kids. So we're excited about that. But you can find me right now on Dr. Z_MD on all social platforms.
Okay, and when I edit this, I'll be putting all that in. Is there anything else that I might have like not mentioned that you'd like to bring up? Or I know we've kind of been all over the
You got
place.
it all. I loved your questions. They were just different from what I've always talked about. So it was very interesting. The sex question and all of that's really cool because I'm always told, okay, well, what do I do if my kid does this or does this? And I'm like, these are different questions. So this is great.
Well, I hope that you have a wonderful new year and maybe we'll meet in person. That's the goal.
You too.
Thank you,
Yes.
Dr.
Let me
Z.
know if there's anything else you need. Let me know if there's anything else you need for sure. Okay.
All right.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye. Happy New
Bye.
Year. Couple more days. Thanks, everybody, for joining us for another episode of American Mood Swings, where we talk about the brain and all things mental health. Hope to see you next week, and please share with your friends.